It gets down to a value judgment, okay? Free community college, if it were free, it's estimated that 9 million people would be in community college. And it would cost $6 billion a year. It's a lot of money. They say we can't afford it. But here's how we do it. We make a value judgment. We eliminate just one of the tax loopholes out there. It's called stepped-up basis. What it means is that if I go out and buy stock for $1 million, God love me, I wish I could, for $1 million, I still have a dubious distinction when I file my financial disclosure, and Nancy will tell you the Washington Post said, quote, it's probable no vice president ever assumed the office with fewer assets than Joe Biden. I assume they were talking financial assets. But here's the deal. Here's the deal. Right now, if somebody goes out and buys $1 million worth of stock and sells it for $2 million, they pay capital gains on $1 million. But if I buy $1 million worth of stock and I pass away and I leave it to my children, and they sell it for $3 million, but it's worth $2 million when I die, they only pay a capital gains between 2 and 3. We lose that capital gains that would have been paid had I lived and sold it. You know how much that, and by the way, that affects 0.2% of the population, good people, so-called trust fund babies, who are already very, very wealthy. Okay? Now here's the value judgment. To put 9 million people in community college for free, and by the way, 12 years is no longer enough for free education. But to put them in school costs $6 billion a year. You know how much that tax expenditure on stepped-up basis costs the Treasury every year? $17 billion. You eliminate that one thing, you generate another $17 billion in income. We can pay for all the community college and reduce the deficit by another $11 billion. What is best in the interest of the country? Reward people who are already doing incredibly well to not have to pay something the otherwise have to pay, or to increase the productivity and opportunity for millions of Americans. No indication would affect any way the investments they make, but would provide peace of mind for students and the parents of 9 million individuals. Tell me which is better for the country. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in a situation where we're proposing tripling with Nancy, tripling the maximum child care credit. Child care tax credit. 40% of mothers are the breadwinners in their family. And over the last 15 years, women in the workplace, the number going into the workplace, have slowed. Totally qualified, but they've slowed. And we need replacement workers. They slowed because of the rising cost of child care. Too many women are dropping out of the workforce because of the rising cost of child care. In California, it costs between $9,000 to $12,000 a year, in some places even more, for child care. We call for tripling the maximum child care tax credit, as I like to do. That would increase the number of women in the workforce. Studies show that would increase our productivity. It would add another $1.5 trillion to our economy. And our GDP would increase 9% over the next 10 years. It would pay back exponentially greater than it cost. But it cost $80 billion over 10 years, $8 billion a year. And our friends say, we can't afford it. We just can't afford it. We can't afford all of this, they say. But let me give you just one example, and it's an illustration, and I'll get off this. if we were to limit deductions to the tax code to a maximum of 28%, which would cover every middle and upper middle income person out there, it would cause no pain for those who are paying the 39% rate not to be able to deduct at 39%. It would not impact on their willingness to give the charitable deduction. It would punish no one. But over 10 years, it would bring into the United States Treasury another $603 billion. Tell me what we can't afford. Tell me we can't afford to grow the middle class. Tell me we can't afford to increase education. Tell me we can't afford to take the burden off hard-working mothers and fathers. Tell me that that's what we can't do. We can afford that and so much more, and still touch the deficit. Labor union. Labor built the middle class. I said 15 years ago when I got criticized for it at a National Labor Convention, I said, the Chamber of Commerce has declared war on labor's house. Does anybody doubt war has been declared on labor over the last decade? Why do you think middle class people have lost their bargaining power? Ladies and gentlemen, we got to deal unions back into the deal. That means protecting the right to collective bargaining. It means making sure that workers are paid their wages. It means allowing corporations, not allowing corporations to reclassify workers and divide them overtime. It means providing sick leave for over 300,000 workers, which we've done on federal contracts, but do it for all American workers. No one knows the better than California, New York. No one should work 40 hours a week and still live in poverty. Over the near term to $15 an hour. The point is, there's so much we can do that speaks to fairness and growth. You know the expression, do good and do well, but here's where we have an opportunity to do right and to grow the American economy at the same time. Look, folks, don't forget, Republicans haven't changed their stripes. The budget in the House calls for increased demand, further tax cuts for millionaires. I'm not making this up. They're still for eliminating labor's power. They still believe that the benefits, the way this works, is trickle down. They believe it. They haven't changed a bit. And now we're just getting back to basics, man. We're in the cusp of America owning the 21st century. I mean that sincerely. I got elected when I was 29 years old to the United States Senate. I was really, I didn't say, I was characterized always as the idealistic young guy, the optimist. If you read the paper, they still call me the White House optimist, as if I'm the guy who just fell off the turnip truck yesterday. But folks, there's so much more we can do. Well, don't sell this country short, folks. Look, folks, there's one thing I know, if anything else, it's this. If you give the American people, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, I know it from my own family, if you give the American people just a fighting chance, not a hand, just a fighting chance, they have never, ever, 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 ever let their country down. And by the way, I travel the world a lot. I do an awful lot of foreign policy, and The advantage I have is when I go, the leaders I meet with know that I speak to the president. We don't have to check anything. Not a joke. Not a joke. I've traveled over 1,100,000 miles so far, just since being vice president. And ladies and gentlemen, you know what amazes the rest of the world about us? They don't use my term, but I'm going to use the term that I know they believe. There is no quit in America. There is no quit in America or the American. Which means our people aren't the problem. Our politics is the problem. So petty, so personal, so angry, so ugly. And it's far too influenced by big money and PACs and all this in American politics. If you wanted to do one thing, to right the ship of state here completely, is past what I introduced in 1974, a constitutional amendment to publicly fund all elections. We the people, not we the donors. It says we the people. And folks, I'm about to stand here tonight, and I'm sure somebody will not agree with me. Instead of debating our opponents, we demonize them. Instead of questioning judgments, we question motives. Instead of listening, we shout. Instead of looking for solutions, we look to score political points. We can't let this go on because our politics is pulling this country apart. Our politics is trafficking in division. We all see it with Trump and the Republicans, with their talk about building walls and banning Muslims. But if we're honest with ourselves, we've slipped into the blame game too. Look, the most important lesson I learned was when I was a young senator in 1973. When I got elected, and I don't say this for empathy or sympathy, it's just a fact. When I got elected on November the 7th, December 18th, my wife and, when I was in Washington, my wife and daughter were killed. A tractor trailer broadside would kill my wife and daughter, and my two sons were very badly injured. And I wasn't going to go to Washington. Because of great men like Hubert Humphrey, and believe it or not, Fritz Hollings, and a guy you don't even know named Pastore, a senator from Senator from Rhode Island, and Mike Mansfield, and a few others. They came to Delaware to visit me because we had talked to my governor about appointing someone to my place. And they came and said, Joe, just come and stay 6 months, we need you. I was so stupid, Nancy, I didn't realize we had 58 Democratic senators. They didn't need me at all, and they were going to get. But I really mean it. I'm the first senator I ever knew, so I didn't know that. So once a week, Nancy, literally, Senator Mansfield would have me come to his office at 3 o'clock on Tuesday, and he would give me an assignment. I really thought every freshman got an assignment. I did, I swear to God. And I'll never forget, I was walking on the floor, and I used to always walk through those double doors you see on C-SPAN, walk down in the well of the Senate, and look at the President of the Senate and ask, when's the last vote? Because I commuted every day for 36 years to get home with my kids at the time. And so I went in on my way to Senator Mansfield's office at 3 o'clock to check when the last vote would be. And Jesse Helms was on the, you don't remember him, but he was. Oh. Maybe you do. Jesse Helms was on the floor of the Senate, excoriating Ted Kennedy and Bob Dole for the precursors of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I was outraged by it. But because I had my meeting with the leader, I just kept walking in, and I sat down in front of him. And I later learned all he was doing was taking my pulse to see how I was doing with God. But it was a wonderful thing to do for me. And I sat there, and I guess I looked angry. And he sat behind the desk all the time, and he had a corncob pipe. 90% of the time it wasn't lighted, and he took it out, and I said, Joe, what's the matter? He spoke in clipped tone. I said, what's the matter, Joe? And I went on and ripped into Jesse Helms. I said he has no social redeeming value. I went on, and I was so angry. He doesn't care about the handicapped. Mansfield let me go on. And he looked at me, Nancy, my word of advice, and he said, Joe, what would you say if I told you that in December of 1970, it may have been 71, 1970, Jesse and Dot Helms were sitting in their living room reading the Raleigh Observer. There was an advertisement in the paper from an orphanage of a young man in braces up to his hips, 2 canes, saying, all I want for Christmas is someone to love me and take me home. He said, Joe, what would you say if I told you Jesse and Dot Helms went down and adopted that young boy? I said, I'd feel like a jerk. He said, well, Joe, they did. And then he went on to say something, his most important lesson I ever learned in the Senate. He said, Joe, it's always appropriate to question another man or woman's judgment. It's never appropriate to judge the motive because you don't know what it is. And today, 80% of what we do is we question motive, not judgment. When I question your motive and I say it's because you're in the pocket of this or you don't have this value or that, it's awful hard ever to get to a consensus. But I can go after your position till hell won't happen. And we can still, on the merits, we can end up compromising. Folks, America can't take this much longer. We can only survive by consensus. The most heterogeneous democracy in the history of the world. I understand why so many in America, in our party, talk about 2 Americas, but the way I see it, we're one America. We've always done best as a nation. We act as one America. When we see, you see, when we talk about one America, I mean that everyone has an equal chance. Gay, straight, black, white, Hispanic, men, women, children, immigrants, Native Americans. Everybody gets a fair shot. It means we look at our opposition not as an enemy, but as the opposition. It means consensus is necessary. Compromise is not a dirty word. It means we're all bound together in this great experiment of equality and opportunity and democracy. And everyone, and I mean everyone, is in on the deal. My dad used to have an expression, Joey, everyone is entitled to be treated with dignity. Everyone. It may not be a simple, it may be a simple notion, but it's not new. It doesn't make it any less important because it's not new. Everyone knows we have to figure out how to come together. So folks, let me end with this. When world leaders have asked me to, I was with, as Nancy knows, I have probably the most extensive relationship with President Xi of anyone, just because when he was vice president, the 2 presidents decided we should get to know each other. I traveled 18,000 miles with him in China, 3 days with him here. I've had, according to the State Department, over 24, 25 hours of private dinners, just he and I. And we were in Chengdu, China, and he turned to me and he said, can you define America for me? And I said, yes, Mr. President, I can define, Mr. He was then vice president, 2 months before he became president. I said, I can define it in one word, possibilities. Literally, possibilities. As Americans, I believe we're built, whether we are naturalized or native born, we're built to dream big, to see no limits. That's who we are, that's who we've been, that's been stamped into our DNA, and yes, I believe it means something as big as ending cancer in our time. It also means gets to dream big too. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Poor kids, middle-class kids, they have the same hopes, the same aspirations, the same dreams as everyone else. In this country where a black child raised by a single white mom can become president of the United States and a white kid from Scranton can become vice president of the United States. I never felt for one moment growing up in a middle, I guess technically lower middle class household. I never felt for one moment there was anything I couldn't do. Not a single thing. And Barack felt the same way. But our job, if you cut it to the quick, in my view, our obligation as Democrats, as Americans, is to make sure that every kid in this country growing up today thinks that's true. That parents can do what my dad did. We lived in Scranton. I moved to Wilmington when I was going in the 4th grade. I remember my dad walking into my grandpa's home and my mom's 4 brothers and saying, a proud man saying, Ambrose, can you keep Gene and the kids for a year? I'm moving down to Delaware, Wilmington, with jobs. There's no jobs here in Scranton in 54. But I promise I'll come back and I'll make it up to you. And I remember the longest walk any parent has to make is up a short flight of stairs to tell their kids they can't go to the same school, they can't be together anymore. Something's changed. And I, honest to God, remember my father sitting at the end of the bed, telling me where he was moving, and saying it'd take about a year, and I'll bring you and Jimmy and Val and Mom down, and it'll be all right when I get a place. I'll try to come home every weekend. It's only 157 miles. I remember thinking that was like going to the moon. But I remember what he did. He looked at me, and he said, and I knew he believed it, honey, everything is going to be all right. Go back to your old neighborhoods. Go back to the people you grew up with who didn't do as well as you. And ask them, do they feel confident they can look their kid in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the single overarching obligation we have. We can do that. And don't tell me, what even some Democrats tell me, don't tell me that we have to downsize our dreams for the middle class. Don't tell me. There's anything we can't do. I don't buy it. I really don't. And I never will. I don't think the American people buy it. Just give them a chance, folks. Just give them a chance. That's what we're all about as Democrats. Give them a chance. Thank you very much.